I never thought I'd be the kind of guy sharing his personal life online, especially something as messy and painful as this. But here I am, telling my story because I don't want anyone else to end up like me. My name's Ryan, I'm 35, and I've been married to Emma for 10 years. A whole decade. We met back in college, and thinking about it now, those days feel like another lifetime. Emma back then was something else. She had this energy that could light up a room just by walking in. People were drawn to her instantly. And me? I was the guy lucky enough to stand by her side, barely believing someone like her even noticed me. Everything seemed perfect, or at least that's how it looked to everyone else. We were the couple people envied, the ones everyone thought had it all. And for a long time I believed that too. We had what felt like a good marriage. We laughed a lot, had fun nights out, and enjoyed quiet evenings at home. Felt like we had built something solid. That's how it's supposed to be, right? You build a life together, settle into routines, and assume things will work because you've made it this far. But looking back now, I can see the warning signs were there all along. The change didn't happen overnight. It was slow, subtle, and easy to ignore. I brushed off those little moments when something felt off, convincing myself it was nothing. After all, 10 years together isn't something you just throw away, right? The first thing I noticed was her work schedule. Emma had always worked hard and put in long hours, so when she started coming home later than usual, I didn't think much of it at first. I'd ask her about it, and she'd say, "Oh, just another late meeting." Or, "Luke and I are working on this project. It's running late." Luke. Just hearing that name now makes my chest tighten. Back then, I didn't give it a second thought. He was just a coworker. But the late nights kept happening, sometimes way past midnight. And when she did come home, she wasn't herself. She seemed distracted, distant, like her mind was somewhere else. We barely talked anymore. And when we did, it was the same shallow, surface-level stuff. "How was your day?" That was it. Nothing deeper. Started to feel like we were just roommates. We shared a house, routines, and even a bed. But there was this invisible wall between us, and I couldn't figure out why. I started questioning myself. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe work was just overwhelming her. Maybe I wasn't doing enough to keep her happy. You can drive yourself crazy with the maybes. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I just didn't want to face it. Then came the day that changed everything. Started like any other day. I was working from home and decided to clean up some files on the shared laptop we both used. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't suspicious. But as I was organizing some folders, I came across an email. The subject line looked like nothing special, just typical work stuff. But for some reason, I clicked on it. That's when everything changed. The email was from Luke, her coworker, but it wasn't about work. It was personal, filled with warmth and words that left no doubt their relationship had gone far beyond anything professional. Reading it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. He wasn't just a colleague. He was the man my wife had been seeing behind my back. The worst part? She didn't even seem to care enough to hide it. I sat there frozen, staring at the screen for what felt like hours. My mind was racing, my heart pounding in my chest. Anger burned through me, hot and unrelenting. But underneath it, there was something darker, colder. I wanted her to feel the same pain I was feeling. I wanted her to understand the depth of the hurt she had caused. But I knew I couldn't just confront her then and there. Not yet. If I was going to bring this up, I needed more. I needed to know how long this had been going on, how deep the betrayal ran. One email wasn't enough. I couldn't let her twist the story or talk her way out of it. So I did what anyone might do when suspicion eats at you and the truth feels unbearable. I started gathering evidence. I had to see the whole picture. Every call, every text, every message. I needed it all. I needed to know exactly what had been happening behind my back. So I installed spyware on her phone and email. I'm not proud of it, and it's not something I ever thought I'd do. But at that point, the trust was gone, shattered into pieces. If she had betrayed me, I was going to know every last detail of how, when, and why. The spyware revealed everything. Texts, emails, phone logs. I even had the option to listen in on her conversations. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck I couldn't stop. That's what my marriage had become. A disaster unfolding right in front of me. From that day forward, I was living a double life. On the surface, I acted like everything was fine. I smiled, laughed, and played the part of a loving husband. But behind the scenes, I was glued to the spyware, checking it whenever I could. I watched in real time as she texted Luke, arranging their next meetup. I read the flirty exchanges and saw how comfortable they were in their deceit. It was like watching her build a relationship with someone else right in front of my eyes. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. The hardest part? Pretending I didn't know. I'd sit across from her at dinner, listening to her talk about her long, stressful day at work, knowing full well that most of what she said was a lie. Every word felt like another twist of the knife. But I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Not until I had the full story. I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm telling it because I know there are other guys out there, just like me, who think it couldn't happen to them. I didn't think it could happen to me either. But it did. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. Once I started monitoring Emma's phone, it didn't take long for the truth to come out. This wasn't some mistake or momentary lapse in judgment. This was a full-blown affair, and it had been going on for over a year. A whole year. 12 months of lies, secrets, and betrayal right under my nose. The part that stung the most? They were meticulous about it. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. They had a system. Through the spyware, I learned they'd been meeting in hotels during business trips and conferences. Sometimes they'd even fly to different cities just to be together. They had a separate bank account to fund their plans, flights, hotel rooms, fancy dinners, and gifts. Emma had never mentioned any of this to me. Not once. The pain of discovering all this is hard to put into words. It felt like someone had driven a knife into my gut and kept twisting it. And the fact that it had gone on for so long, that was the real blow. I felt like an idiot for not noticing sooner. But as much as I wanted to lose it, as much as I wanted to scream and confront her right then and there, I knew I couldn't, not yet. I wanted to confront her, to tear her world apart, but I couldn't, not yet. We had 2 daughters, Grace and Lily, and they didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this mess. I had to be smart, careful. I needed time to figure out my next move. But every time I looked at Emma after that, all I could see was her betrayal. She tried to act normal, like nothing was wrong, but I could see right through her. The guilt was practically written all over her face. It all started to make sense. Her coldness, her distance, it wasn't just exhaustion or stress from work. It was the weight of the lies she was living. Every excuse she gave me, I'm just stressed from work, or I'm so tired lately, wasn't about her job. She was stressed because she was leading a double life, trying to keep everything balanced without slipping up. And it became clear that Luke wasn't just some fleeting fling. No, he was her escape. He was her way of filling some void that I apparently couldn't. That realization hit harder than anything else. It wasn't just the betrayal of her actions. It was the idea that I wasn't enough for her anymore. Everything we had built, everything we had gone through together, wasn't enough for her. I wasn't just being replaced physically. I was being replaced emotionally, too. She tried to act loving at home, but the cracks were there. I could see them. The guilt was eating away at her, even if she tried to hide it. But it didn't stop her. She was too far down this path to turn back. Even with all that, I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I wanted to be deliberate, calculated. When the time came, I needed to make sure I had the upper hand. No heated arguments where she could twist things around and make me out to be the bad guy. No, when I confronted her, it had to be final. So, in the meantime, I kept up the act. I played the role of the clueless husband for the sake of our kids. I helped Grace with her homework, took Lily to soccer practice, and did all the fatherly things I'd always done. I couldn't let them see the cracks in our marriage. Not yet. They were too young to understand the storm that was coming, and I wasn't going to let Emma's choices destroy their world until I was ready to make my move. But every day it got harder to keep up the charade. Every time I saw Emma on her phone, I knew exactly who she was texting. Every time she said she was working late or going out with friends, I knew where she really was, and it ate me up inside. I'd lie in bed next to her, knowing she had just come back from being with him, and I had to pretend like everything was fine. It wasn't just the anger that consumed me, it was the betrayal. She hadn't just broken my trust. She had betrayed everything we had built together. I had given her my heart, my life, and our family, and in return, she had given herself to someone else. I could have confronted her right then and there, thrown all the evidence in her face, but I didn't. I stayed quiet. I needed more time. If I was going to do this, I had to be methodical. So I waited. I observed. I planned. Every move Emma made, I was watching, always 2 steps ahead. I was gathering more evidence, letting her dig herself deeper without realizing it. She had no idea what was coming. When the time came, she wouldn't just walk away from this. She'd face the consequences of every lie, every secret, and every betrayal. Once I decided to play the long game, I knew I couldn't let anything slip. Emma had to believe she was still in control, that I had no clue what was really going on. So I kept up the act. I was the loving, doting husband who didn't suspect a thing. It wasn't easy, but it had to be convincing. I gave her the space she seemed to want, acted like her late nights didn't bother me, and even started asking about her work more often. I'd inquire about her meetings and how her projects were going. Every time she looked me in the eye and lied, I smiled and nodded as if I believed her. But inside, I was seething. Inside, it felt like I was feeding a fire that was slowly consuming me. But I wasn't just sitting back, letting her think she was getting away with it. Behind the scenes, I was taking action. I started small, siphoning money into a private account. Nothing too obvious, just little transfers here and there. I wasn't about to be left with nothing when everything came crashing down. I knew I'd need a financial cushion when the time came to pull the trigger on the divorce. While she carried on, thinking her life was carefree, I was quietly collecting every piece of evidence I could find. Every single text, every call, every detail about her affair with Luke. I documented it all. Screenshots, emails, even photos. There would be no denying it when the time came. I wasn't going to let her twist the story or manipulate her way out of it. I had the proof and I was ready to use it. One of the smartest things I did was hire a divorce lawyer early on. We met in secret and I told him everything. He helped me map out a plan, not just to get out of the marriage but to protect myself and my daughters. Timing was everything, he said. We agreed to wait until my case was solid, airtight. When I finally served the divorce papers, it would catch her completely off guard. But then I realized something else. I wasn't the only one being betrayed. Luke had a wife, Sarah. I'd seen her around at school events, PTA meetings, and the like. She seemed like a nice enough woman, if a little distant. And who could blame her? She was married to a man like Luke. I knew she deserved to know the truth, but I couldn't just dump it all on her without preparation. I needed to be strategic. If I could get her on my side, it would strengthen my position. So, I started arranging playdates for Grace and Lily with Sarah's kids, who attended the same school. At first, it was casual. While the kids played, Sarah and I would chat, just small talk, nothing too serious. I needed to build trust to create a rapport with her. Slowly, I started dropping hints. Emma's been working late with Luke a lot lately. That must be hard on you guys, I'd say, or, funny how work seems to pull people in so many directions these days. Nothing too direct, but just enough to plant a seed of doubt. I could see the gears turning in her head, even if she didn't say much. Soon, Sarah started to get suspicious. You could see it in the way she checked her phone when Luke wasn't around or how her smile faltered whenever I brought up work. She was starting to put the pieces together, but she still needed confirmation. That's when I gave her what she needed, proof. I showed her just enough of what I'd gathered. Texts between Emma and Luke, a few suggestive messages, plans for hotel stays. I didn't overwhelm her with everything I had. I just gave her enough to confirm her fears. I'll never forget the look on her face when she saw it. The color drained from her cheeks, and her hands started to shake. She whispered, "Something felt off," but I didn't want to believe it. I felt for her, I really did. I knew exactly what she was going through. I was living it too, but a part of me was cold, calculating. I needed her on my side for what was coming next. Sarah was going to be my secret weapon. Together, we'd make sure Emma and Luke faced the consequences of their choices. I wasn't aiming for a clean break. That would have been too easy. No, I wanted them to feel the full weight of their betrayal, to experience the pain and humiliation I had endured. Exposing them for who they truly were was the goal. Months of preparation had led to this moment. Sarah and I carefully planned every move, every conversation, every detail. We knew exactly what we were going to do. Emma and Luke thought they were safe, that their affair was still tucked away in the shadows. But Sarah and I were about to drag it into the light, and once it was out there, there'd be no going back for either of them. It all came to a head on what should have been a special day, our anniversary. 10 years of marriage. 10 years I thought had meaning, only to realize it was all a lie. Now, those years felt meaningless, like they'd been thrown away. And Emma? She didn't even see it coming. I suggested we take a romantic weekend getaway. A chance to reconnect, to rekindle what we once had. I played the part perfectly. Flowers, a heartfelt note, the works. Everything she'd expect from a husband still trying to make things right. I could see the flicker of guilt in her eyes the second I brought it up. She hesitated just for a moment. I could almost see her calculating how she'd juggle me and Luke that weekend. But in the end, she agreed. How could she say no to a husband who seemed so eager to fix things? Meanwhile, Sarah was making moves of her own. She arranged for Luke to take a business trip, something Emma was used to and wouldn't question. It was almost too perfect. Luke wouldn't suspect a thing. We picked a hotel not far from where Emma and Luke had been sneaking around. A place they'd feel comfortable, just like all the other times they'd met. Everything was set. The night of the trip, it all came together. Emma and I checked into the hotel, but I had no intention of spending a single moment there with her. Sarah and I had been keeping tabs on their movements, so we knew exactly where they were headed. After making some excuse about needing to take a work call, I slipped out of the room, my heart pounding. This was it. Sarah was already waiting for me in the lobby when I got there. We exchanged a silent nod, both of us fully aware of what was about to go down. Together, we made our way to the room where Luke and Emma were supposed to meet. My adrenaline was surging, my hands shaking. Not with fear, but with rage. Months of pretending everything was fine, of holding back while they lied and betrayed us. It had all led to this. We watched as Emma and Luke arrived separately, just like they always did. First Luke, then Emma, each slipping into the hotel room like it was their own private hideaway. They had no idea what was coming. Sarah and I waited a few minutes, just long enough for them to drop their guard and settle in. Then, without hesitation, we burst into the room. The look on their faces was unforgettable. Emma's eyes went wide, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to form words but couldn't. Luke froze in place, completely stunned. They didn't even have time to react, let alone come up with an excuse. It was a perfect snapshot of their secret life, exposed in an instant. Emma's panic was written all over her face. Her skin went pale, and I could see the fear in her eyes as she realized what was happening. But it was too late. I had the camera rolling, capturing every single moment. I kept my voice calm, cold, and controlled as I spoke. "Emma," I said, "I've known for a long time. I know everything." She tried to stammer out a response, maybe some excuse or an apology, but I wasn't interested. The time for lies was over. Her hands were trembling, and she couldn't even look me in the eye. That's when I knew I had her. The game was over, and she knew it too. There was no escaping, no twisting the truth this time. Sarah stood silently beside me, her expression as cold as mine. Luke, on the other hand, looked like a deer caught in headlights. His face was a mix of shock and fear, but I could tell he was more worried about Sarah than me. His eyes darted between us, unsure of what to say or do. He had no idea how badly this was going to end for him. I made sure to get it all on camera. Every word, every reaction, every detail. This wasn't just about catching them in the act. This was about making sure they couldn't escape the truth, couldn't spin the story to their advantage. Every moment of their humiliation was etched into my mind. Emma could barely speak, and when she tried to open her mouth to explain herself, I silenced her with a sharp wave of my hand. "Save it," I said, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "You don't get to explain anything." A strange calm washed over me. All the anger, pain, and betrayal that had built up over the months leading to this moment seemed to crystallize into something detached, almost numb. It was like I was watching someone else's life fall apart, not my own. There were no shouts or screaming, just the stark, undeniable truth laid bare for everyone to see. Emma stood there, frozen, unable to move, while Luke stammered, desperately trying to find words to salvage something, anything. But there was nothing they could say to undo what had already happened. Sarah and I exchanged a glance, then walked out of the room without another word. There was no need to stay and listen to their scrambling excuses or their empty pleas for forgiveness. We had what we came for, proof. They couldn't hide from the truth anymore. As we left the hotel, I knew this was just the start. The divorce was coming, and with the evidence I'd gathered, Emma wouldn't stand a chance. But in that moment, walking away from the wreckage of what had once been my marriage, I felt like I'd already won. The lies, the deceit, the endless pretending. It was all over. The truth was out, and it was only a matter of time before the consequences hit. Sure enough, just a few days later, Emma showed up at my door. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her voice trembling as she begged for forgiveness. "Ryan, please," she sobbed, standing in the kitchen where we used to share meals and talk about everything. Now, it felt like a battlefield, the ground littered with the remains of our broken marriage. "It was a mistake," she said, her voice cracking. "I wasn't thinking straight. I still love you. We can fix this." Her words rang hollow. A mistake? A year of lies, secret trips, hidden hotel rooms, a joint bank account she'd never mentioned. That wasn't a mistake. It was a betrayal carefully planned and carried out over months. And as for love, whatever we'd once had was destroyed the moment she chose someone else over me. I stared at her, the coldness inside me growing with every word she spoke. "You didn't make a mistake, Emma. You made a choice. Every time you met with him, every lie you told, it was your choice. You didn't love me then, and I doubt you love me now." Her face crumpled, and I saw the guilt and fear in her eyes. But I didn't feel anything. Not sympathy, not sadness, just a grim sense of finality. I wasn't about to let her manipulate her way back into my life with apologies and tears. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about closure. It was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. I reached for the divorce papers I'd been holding on to for days. The shock on her face as I handed them to her was almost palpable. Disbelief, horror. Every emotion flashed across her face as she took them from me. I spoke calmly, my voice firm. "Sign them. It's over." Her hands trembled as she stared at the papers, her voice breaking. "Ryan, please, don't do this. We can fix this. I'll go to therapy, I'll do anything. Just don't give up on us." I shook my head, disgusted. "There's nothing to fix. You destroyed our marriage. I'm not interested in bringing something back from the dead." She didn't argue anymore. She stood there clutching the papers like they were her last lifeline, her desperation plain as day. But it was too late. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there in the ruins of what she had destroyed. The fallout was quick and inevitable. Sarah didn't waste any time. She filed for divorce from Luke the very next day. The consequences of their actions were unraveling rapidly, and there was no way to stop it. The scandal spread like wildfire through our circle. It didn't take long before everyone knew what had happened. Luke lost his job. Turns out, sleeping with a coworker's wife doesn't do much for corporate reputation. As for Emma, her reputation was in ruins. Friends she once relied on turned their backs on her, and whispers followed her wherever she went. It was almost poetic. For months, I had been the one humiliated, betrayed, and left to pick up the pieces. Now it was Emma and Luke drowning in public shame. Their secret had been exposed, and there was no escaping the fallout. But the gossip and ruined reputations didn't matter much to me. What truly mattered was Grace and Lily. I wasn't going to let Emma's choices drag our daughters into her mess. I had gathered more than enough evidence to ensure I would get full custody. And when it came time for the court hearing, the judge didn't even hesitate. He awarded me full custody, citing Emma's infidelity and lack of stability. That moment is etched into my memory forever. Watching Emma as the judge read the decision, she looked devastated, like her entire world was collapsing. In a way, it was. She had lost me, lost her standing in the community, and now, she had lost her kids. But that was no longer my problem. I had fought for this and I had won. It was time to move on. The divorce settlement went exactly as planned. I kept the house. The one where Grace and Lily had grown up. The one that still held echoes of a time when we were a family. I walked away with primary custody, ensuring my daughters stayed with me, far away from the chaos Emma had created. She was left with a small apartment and visitation rights. Nothing more. Everything she thought she'd keep. Her family, her life, her security was gone. She had thrown it all away for nothing. It wasn't about the house or the money. It was about the principle. She had sacrificed her family for a brief, meaningless affair. I had spent months preparing for this, carefully setting the stage to ensure everything would fall in my favor. And it had. Financially, I was secure. Emotionally, I had come out on top. I didn't just survive the betrayal. I rebuilt my life from the ground up. Every calculated move, every piece of evidence, every decision I made had led to this moment. Emma, on the other hand, was left picking up the pieces. She was ostracized, isolated, and left to face the consequences of her own actions. Luke was out of the picture, his life in ruins. For Emma, he had been nothing more than a fleeting distraction, something to fill the emptiness she felt. Now, she was left to live with that void, but that was no longer my problem. I had no regrets. The pain was real, but it became the fire that pushed me forward. My focus shifted entirely to my daughters, being the father they deserved, creating a life where they felt safe and loved. Watching them grow, hearing their laughter, and knowing they were happy became my purpose. It was the redemption I needed, and in the end, it was all that truly mattered. For the first time in a long time, I began to trust myself again. Emma's betrayal didn't break me. It forged me into something stronger. I came out of that nightmare with my dignity intact, something Emma would never be able to claim for herself. She was a shell of the woman I once knew, desperately trying to rebuild the life she had torn apart with her own hands. Looking back, my revenge wasn't about destroying her. It was about reclaiming what she tried to take from me. My sense of self, my confidence, my future. By being patient, staying focused, and playing the long game, I didn't just win the divorce. I won back my life. I proved to Emma that her betrayal wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning of something better. Better. That's the word I'd use to describe where I am now. I'm sharing my story, not to brag, but to show others that it's possible to come out stronger after betrayal. It might feel like it's going to crush you, but if you stay focused, keep your head clear, and don't let anger consume you, you can rebuild. You can rise again just like I did. Emma's downfall wasn't my triumph. It was her choice. All I did was make sure she couldn't take me down with her. It's been a year since everything happened, and I figured it was time to give an update. So much has changed, and honestly, I never thought I'd be in such a good place after everything that went down. If you told me a year ago that I'd come out of this happier, stronger, and more at peace, I probably would have called you crazy. But here I am. I'm doing better than I ever expected. After everything settled, I put all my energy into rebuilding my life, starting with being the best father I could be to Grace and Lily. They're both doing great, by the way. They've adjusted to the changes far better than I thought they would. Staying in the family home has been a big help, and I've made sure they know they're loved no matter what. As for Emma, she's no longer a major part of our lives. She has her visitation rights, but her relationship with the girls is strained. I've stayed out of it. I don't try to influence how they feel about her. I let them decide for themselves. Right now, they're not very interested in spending much time with her. I think they're still working through everything in their own way. From what I've heard, Emma is still trying to rebuild her life, but it hasn't been going well. She's stuck in the fallout from the affair and hasn't made much progress. That's her journey to navigate, though. It's not my concern anymore. As for me, I've moved forward. I won't pretend it's been easy. There were days when the weight of it all felt unbearable, when I wondered if I'd ever feel normal again. But time has a way of healing, and slowly, I started putting myself back together. Now, I'm in a much better place. I've even started seeing someone. We've been together for a few months now, and it's been refreshing. I won't go into too much detail, but she's been exactly what I needed: calm, supportive, and honest. There's no drama, no secrets, just a connection built on trust and understanding. It's been a breath of fresh air in my life. Work has been steady, and I've started thinking more about the future. I've been saving up for trips with the girls, creating new memories together. We've already taken one trip to the beach, and watching them laugh and play in the sand, carefree and happy, was a moment I'll never forget. I want to give them the kind of childhood they deserve, free from the shadows of the past. Looking back, I don't regret how things turned out. If anything, I'm grateful that the painful experience forced me to reevaluate what truly matters in life. Emma's betrayal hurt, but it didn't define me. It gave me the opportunity to rebuild and to show my daughters that no matter what life throws your way, you can rise above it. So yeah, I'm doing well. Better than I ever thought I could a year ago. To everyone who followed my story and offered support along the way, thank you. It meant more than you'll ever know. And if you're going through something similar, just remember, it does get better. You just have to keep moving forward.